The Imperial starship Draconius Rex hung in orbit above the human colony world of New Terra, like a massive golden predator. Its crystalline spires caught the light of the binary suns, casting rainbow patterns across its armored hull. Inside the ship's most luxurious dining chamber, Empress Zephyria Goldscale reclined on cushions of imported silk, her massive dragon form barely fitting within the reinforced walls. At 200 feet long from snout to tail, Zephyria was a sight that had made entire star systems surrender without firing a single shot. Her scales gleamed like molten gold, and her eyes burned with the cold fire of ancient intelligence. She had ruled the Draconic Empire for 3 centuries, expanding its borders through conquest and intimidation. To her, other species were either subjects or obstacles to be removed. Today's diplomatic dinner was merely a formality. The human colony would submit to imperial rule, or it would be reduced to ash and memory. She had done this dance 1,000 times before across 100 worlds. The outcome was never in doubt. The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss and a small figure entered carrying a silver tray. Zephyria's massive head turned slightly, expecting to see one of her usual draconic servants. Instead, she found herself looking down at a human female, barely 5 feet tall, with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, and wearing the plain uniform of service staff. "Your Imperial Majesty," the human said, bowing respectfully but not fearfully. "I am Sarah Chen, and I'll be serving you this evening." Zephyria's eyes narrowed. It was unusual for humans to be allowed anywhere near her presence, let alone to serve her meals. Her security detail must have approved this arrangement, though she couldn't fathom why. The Empress was about to demand an explanation when something else caught her attention. Strapped to the human's back was a small carrier, and from within came the soft, distressed sounds of a young dragon in pain. Zephyria's head snapped forward, her nostrils flaring as she caught the scent. It was indeed a dragon hatchling, but something was wrong. The scent carried notes of sickness, of genetic malformation. "What is that creature you carry?" Zephyria's voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to protect the carrier. "This is Luna, Your Majesty. She's my adopted daughter." The words hit Zephyria like a plasma cannon blast. A human claiming a dragon as her child? The very concept was so alien, so impossible, that for a moment the ancient Empress found herself speechless. Dragons were the supreme species of the galaxy. They did not need care from lesser beings, certainly not from humans. "Explain yourself," Zephyria commanded, her voice dangerously low. "How do you come to possess a dragon hatchling?" Sarah carefully set down the tray and moved to a safe distance before responding. 3 months ago, I found her abandoned in the ruins of a crashed Imperial transport ship. She was barely alive, and her left wing was completely underdeveloped. The other survivors said she was deemed defective and left to die. Each word struck Zephyria like a physical blow. In draconic culture, genetic imperfection was indeed cause for abandonment. It was an ancient law, written in their most sacred texts. The strong survived, the weak perished, and the species remained pure. She had enforced this law herself, countless times throughout her reign, but something about seeing this tiny human tenderly caring for what her own people had discarded stirred something deep within her ancient heart, something she had thought long dead. "The hatchling lives still," she observed, her tone carefully neutral. "Yes, Your Majesty. It hasn't been easy. Luna requires special food, constant medication, and physical therapy for her wing, but she's getting stronger every day. She's learning to speak, and she's incredibly bright. Yesterday she figured out how to solve a puzzle that was meant for children twice her age." Sarah's eyes lit up as she spoke about the young dragon, and Zephyria found herself studying the human's face intently. There was no fear there, no resentment toward the creature that would grow up to be a member of the species that had conquered her world. There was only love, pure and unconditional. "Show me," Zephyria commanded. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then carefully removed the carrier from her back. She opened the soft mesh front and a tiny golden head peeked out. The hatchling was indeed malformed, her left wing a withered stub barely a quarter the size it should be. But her eyes were bright and alert, and when she saw Zephyria, she let out a small chirp of recognition. "Dragon Mother," Luna said in perfectly pronounced Draconic, her voice high and sweet. "Big Dragon Mother." Zephyria's massive form went completely still. The hatchling had recognized her not as an empress or a conqueror, but simply as another dragon, and the term she had used, Dragon Mother, was one that hadn't been spoken to Zephyria in over 2 centuries. Not since she had been forced to abandon her own malformed hatchling to maintain her position and honor. "She speaks our tongue," Zephyria whispered, her voice strangely thick. "I've been teaching her," Sarah said proudly. "She picks up languages incredibly quickly. She's already fluent in human standard Draconic, and she's starting to learn Centaurian tradespeak. I think she might become a translator someday, maybe help different species understand each other better." The human's casual words painted a future that Zephyria had never imagined. A dragon serving as a bridge between species rather than their conqueror. A malformed hatchling not only surviving, but thriving under the care of what Draconic society considered a lesser being. Luna wiggled in her carrier, reaching out with tiny claws towards Zephyria. "Want to see Big Dragon Mother up close? Please, Mama Sarah?" Zephyria found herself leaning forward before she consciously decided to do so. This close, she could see that despite her physical limitations, Luna was indeed a beautiful hatchling. Her scales were the color of pale gold, and her eyes held an intelligence that reminded Zephyria painfully of her own lost child. For 3 centuries, she had ruled through strength and fear. She had built an empire on the principle that dragons were superior to all other life forms. But in this moment, watching a human woman gently stroke the head of a disabled dragon hatchling with such obvious love and devotion, Zephyria began to question everything she thought she knew about strength, weakness, and what it truly meant to be superior. Zephyria remained motionless for several long moments, her ancient mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. The human woman, Sarah, continued to care for Luna with practiced ease, adjusting the hatchling's position in the carrier and offering her a small piece of processed meat that had been specially prepared for her dietary needs. "How do you know what to feed her?" Zephyria asked, her curiosity overriding her imperial protocol for the first time in decades. Sarah smiled softly. "Trial and error mostly. When I first found Luna, she was so weak she could barely swallow. The local human doctors didn't know anything about dragon physiology, so I had to research everything myself. I studied every piece of draconic medical data I could get my hands on, reached out to xenobiologists across 3-star systems, even traded favors with information brokers to access imperial medical databases." The Empress's eyes widened slightly. Accessing imperial medical databases without authorization was a crime punishable by immediate execution. Yet this small human had risked her life repeatedly, not for personal gain or political advantage, but simply to save a creature her own people had deemed worthless. "You violated imperial security for a malformed hatchling," Zephyria stated, though her tone held more amazement than anger. "I violated imperial security for my daughter," Sarah corrected firmly, "and I'd do it again." Luna made a small sound of contentment and nuzzled against Sarah's hand. The gesture was so natural, so full of trust and affection, that it sent an unexpected pang through Zephyria's chest. She remembered her own lost hatchling making similar sounds before duty, and law had forced her to abandon him to the cold vacuum of space. "Tell me about her progress," Zephyria commanded, settling more comfortably on her cushions. She told herself this was merely intelligence gathering, a way to understand human capabilities. She certainly wasn't interested in the well-being of a defective hatchling. Sarah's face brightened immediately. "Where do I start?" 3 months ago, she couldn't even lift her head. Now she can crawl short distances, and she's starting to walk. Her good wing is developing perfectly, and while her left wing will never allow her to fly, the physical therapy has strengthened the muscles enough that she can at least extend it for balance. As if understanding the conversation, Luna stretched out her functional wing, showing off the delicate membrane and tiny developing flight feathers. The movement was clumsy but determined, and Zephyria found herself impressed despite her best efforts to remain detached. "The remarkable thing is her mind," Sarah continued. "Dragon intelligence is extraordinary even in hatchlings, but Luna seems special even by those standards. She's already reading simple texts in 3 languages, and yesterday she demonstrated an understanding of basic mathematical concepts that most human children don't grasp until they're 8 or 9 years old." "She reads?" Zephyria leaned forward, genuinely surprised. Even among healthy dragon hatchlings, literacy typically didn't develop until they were at least 6 months old. "Show the big dragon mother, Mama Sarah," Luna piped up eagerly. "Show her the book." Sarah reached into a pouch on her belt and pulled out a small data pad. She activated it and handed it to Luna, who gripped it carefully with her tiny claws. The screen displayed a children's story written in simple draconic script, and Luna began to read aloud, her pronunciation clear despite her young voice. Once upon a time, there was a brave dragon who protected a village of small creatures from a terrible storm. The dragon used her great wings to shield them from the wind and rain, and her fire to keep them warm through the long, cold night. Zephyria's breath caught. It was an old draconic fable, one traditionally told to teach hatchlings about the responsibility that came with their power. But Luna was reading it with such enthusiasm, as if the idea of dragons protecting smaller beings was the most natural thing in the world. "This story," Zephyria said slowly, "where did you find it?" "In the cultural database of the crashed ship," Sarah replied. "I thought it was important for Luna to know stories from her own people's tradition. Though I have to admit I was surprised by how many draconic tales focus on protection and cooperation rather than conquest." The observation struck Zephyria like a physical blow. She had spent so many centuries focusing on the martial traditions of her people that she had nearly forgotten the older stories, the ones that spoke of dragons as guardians rather than conquerors. Those tales had been quietly suppressed during the expansion years, deemed too soft for a warrior culture. "Read another one, Luna," she found herself saying. Luna's eyes lit up with joy. "Yes, Big Dragon Mother. This one is about a dragon who learned wisdom from a tiny bird." As the hatchling began another story, Zephyria noticed something she hadn't seen before. Other humans had quietly entered the chamber, members of the diplomatic delegation who had come to negotiate their world's surrender. But instead of showing the fear and submission she was accustomed to, they were watching Luna with the same protective warmth that Sarah displayed. An elderly human male in formal diplomatic robes approached slowly, his movements respectful but not subservient. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said, "I am Ambassador Harrison, and I speak for the colony of New Terra." Zephyria barely glanced at him, her attention still focused on Luna, who had finished her story and was now showing off her ability to count in 3 different languages. "Speak quickly," she said dismissively. "My time is valuable. Of course, Your Majesty. We come not to surrender, but to make an offer." Now Zephyria did look at him, her golden eyes flashing dangerously. "You dare to negotiate with me? Your world has no military, no defenses, nothing to bargain with." Ambassador Harrison remained calm. "We have something you don't, Your Majesty. We have the knowledge and dedication to care for dragons that your own society has abandoned." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Zephyria's massive form tensed, ready to incinerate the insolent human where he stood. But then Luna laughed, a sound of pure joy as Sarah gently tickled her neck ridges, and the Empress found her anger cooling as quickly as it had risen. "Explain," she said through gritted teeth. "In the 3 months since we found Luna, word has spread throughout our colonies. We've discovered 17 more abandoned dragon hatchlings, all with various genetic conditions that made them unsuitable by Imperial standards. Our medical teams, working with volunteers like Sarah, have saved 14 of them." Zephyria's world tilted. 17 hatchlings, 14 survivors. In her empire, those 17 would have been left to die without a second thought, their deaths recorded as genetic weaknesses removed from the breeding pool. The idea that these humans had not only saved them but were actively seeking out more was incomprehensible. "What do you want in return?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Partnership," Ambassador Harrison said simply. "We propose a new kind of relationship between our species. Not conquest and submission, but cooperation. We help care for and educate your people's discarded young, and in return, we work together to build something better than either of our civilizations could achieve alone." Sarah looked up from Luna, her expression hopeful but nervous. "Your Majesty, I know this goes against everything your empire stands for, but look at Luna. Look at what she's become with just a little care and love. Imagine what she could become with a full lifetime of it. Imagine what all those lost hatchlings could become." Luna chose that moment to look directly at Zephyria with her bright, intelligent eyes. "Big Dragon Mother stay with Luna and Mama Sarah? Play stories?" The simple question from the hatchling she should have viewed as defective and worthless struck Zephyria with the force of a supernova. For the first time in 3 centuries, the mighty Dragon Empress felt her carefully constructed worldview beginning to crumble. The silence in the chamber stretched for what felt like an eternity. Zephyria's massive form remained perfectly still, but inside her ancient mind a war was raging. 3 centuries of imperial doctrine clashed against the simple sight of a disabled hatchling, thriving under human care. "You speak of partnership," she finally said, her voice carefully controlled. "But you are insects compared to the might of the Draconic Empire. Why should I not simply take these hatchlings and leave your world in ashes?" Ambassador Harrison stood his ground, though Zephyria could smell the fear scent rising from him. "Because, Your Majesty, force cannot create what we're offering. Love cannot be conquered. It can only be freely given." "Mama Sarah not afraid of Big Dragon, Mother," Luna announced proudly, patting Sarah's arm with one tiny claw. Mama Sarah brave like dragons in stories. The innocent observation hit harder than any weapon could have. Zephyria lowered her great head until she was at eye level with the small human woman. This close, she could see the exhaustion in Sarah's eyes, the evidence of sleepless nights spent caring for a creature that most of the galaxy would consider worthless. She could also see something else, a strength that had nothing to do with physical power or military might. "You are not afraid," Zephyria observed. "Why?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "Because fear doesn't help Luna. When I found her, she was dying not just from her physical condition, but from abandonment. Dragons are social creatures, Your Majesty. They need connection, purpose, love. Fear would have taught her that the universe was a cold, hostile place. Instead, I wanted to show her that there are beings who care about her for who she is, not what she can do for them." The words echoed strangely in Zephyria's mind. When was the last time someone had cared about her for who she was rather than what she could do for them? When was the last time she had experienced genuine connection rather than calculated submission? "Show me the others," she commanded suddenly. Ambassador Harrison looked surprised. "Your Majesty? The other hatchlings you claim to have saved. I would see them." Sarah and the ambassador exchanged glances. "That would require traveling to the surface, Your Majesty. The medical facility is in New Geneva Colony. Then we will go to the surface." Within an hour, Zephyria's massive form had been transported to New Terra's surface in a specially modified shuttle. She had to suppress her instincts as a conqueror, reminding herself that this was not an invasion but something far more complicated. Her security detail was nervous about the unscheduled surface visit, but they dared not question their Empress directly. The medical facility was a modest building by imperial standards, but as soon as Zephyria entered, she could hear them. The chirps, calls, and baby babble of young dragons. The sound stirred something deep in her maternal instincts that she had thought permanently suppressed. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, the facility's director, was a middle-aged human with graying hair and kind eyes. She showed no fear as she approached the towering Dragon Empress, though Zephyria noticed her hands trembling slightly. "Your Imperial Majesty, welcome to the New Geneva Draconic Care Center. We're honored by your visit." "Show me," was all Zephyria said. The first nursery room contained 5 hatchlings all around Luna's age. One was missing his tail tip. Another had scales that grew in patches rather than the usual smooth patterns, and a third was significantly smaller than normal. But all of them were alert, active, and clearly well cared for. Human volunteers sat with each one, reading stories, helping with feeding, or simply providing companionship. "This is Marcus," Dr. Reeves said, indicating the small hatchling. "He was born with a growth hormone deficiency. In the wild, he wouldn't have survived past his first week. Here, with hormone therapy and specialized nutrition, he's thriving. He's actually ahead of typical development curves in terms of cognitive abilities." Marcus looked up at the mention of his name and chirped happily. "Hello, Big Dragon. Are you here to play?" Zephyria found herself crouching down to the hatchling's level. "What do you like to play?" "Building games. Sarah's friend Tom taught me about engineering. Watch." Marcus carefully arranged a set of magnetic blocks into a complex structure that demonstrated an intuitive understanding of load distribution and structural integrity. "Remarkable," Zephyria whispered. In Imperial society, Marcus would have been culled immediately for his size. Yet here he was, displaying talents that could benefit any civilization. The tour continued through several more rooms. Zephyria met Arya, a hatchling with partial blindness who had developed extraordinary hearing and was learning to navigate by echolocation. She encountered Jasper, whose wings were malformed but who showed incredible artistic talent, creating beautiful sculptures with his claws. Each hatchling had found ways to compensate for their physical limitations, developing skills and personalities that would have been impossible under Imperial doctrine. But it was the last room that nearly broke Zephyria's composure entirely. Here lay the most severely disabled hatchlings, those requiring constant medical care. One in particular caught her attention, a small female with golden scales much like her own, but whose spinal development had been so severely compromised that she would never be able to move her lower body. "This is Hope," Dr. Reeves said softly. "We almost lost her 3 times in the first month. But she's a fighter." Hope looked up at Zephyria with bright, intelligent eyes. "Are you the Empress from the stories? The golden dragon who rules the stars?" "I am," Zephyria replied, surprised by the lack of reverence in the hatchling's tone. "Sarah says you're very important and very busy. But you came to visit us anyway." "That was nice of you." The simple gratitude in Hope's voice was devastating. Here was a hatchling who, by every measure of imperial law, should not exist. Yet she possessed a dignity and grace that put many of Zephyria's court dragons to shame. "Hope is learning to be a teacher," Dr. Reeves continued. "She helps the newer arrivals adjust to life here. Her disability has given her tremendous empathy for others who are struggling." "I help scared babies not be scared," Hope explained proudly. "Sometimes when new dragons come, they think they're broken. But nobody's broken here. We're just different." Zephyria felt something wet on her cheek and realized with shock that she was crying. She, who had not shed a tear in 2 centuries, was weeping for these discarded children who had found more purpose and joy in their brief lives than she had found in 300 years of conquest. "Your Majesty," Dr. Reeves said gently, "there's something else you should know. The hatchlings have been asking about their origins, about the Draconic Empire and their heritage. We've been teaching them what we can, but they're hungry for connection to their own culture. Hope, in particular, has been asking if she'll ever meet another dragon besides Luna." "You want to meet others like yourself?" Zephyria asked Hope directly. "Oh, yes." Hope's eyes lit up. "Sarah and the humans are wonderful, and I love them very much. But sometimes I wonder what it would be like to talk to someone who understands what it's like to have dragon dreams and dragon thoughts." The longing in the young hatchling's voice was unmistakable. These children were thriving under human care, but they were still dragons. They needed connection to their own species, their own heritage, their own kind. As Zephyria looked around the room at all these saved lives, these rejected children who had become remarkable individuals under human guidance, she realized that her world was about to change forever. She could no longer return to her empire and pretend she hadn't seen this. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Luna's small voice broke through her thoughts. "Big dragon mother staying for dinner? Hope makes good songs to sing while eating." For the first time in centuries, Zephyria smiled. It was a small expression, barely visible on her massive features, but it was genuine. "Yes, little one. I believe I will stay for dinner." Dinner at the care center was unlike anything in Zephyria's 3 centuries of experience. Instead of the formal dining protocols of her imperial court, she found herself in a large, warm room filled with the cheerful chaos of young dragons and their human caregivers sharing a meal together. The hatchlings had insisted that she sit in the center of their circle, though her massive form required several furniture rearrangements to accommodate her. Luna had claimed the spot directly in front of her, while Hope positioned herself where she could see Zephyria's face clearly. The other young dragons gathered around with an excitement that was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. "Tell us about the Empire," requested Arya, the partially blind hatchling. Her clouded eyes couldn't see Zephyria clearly, but her exceptional hearing caught every nuance in the Empress's voice. "What are the imperial cities like?" Zephyria found herself in unfamiliar territory. Her usual descriptions of the Empire focused on military might, territorial expansion, and the supremacy of dragon culture. But looking at these eager young faces, she realized such tales would be meaningless to beings who would never be allowed to participate in that society. "The capital city of Dracoheim stretches across 3 continents," she began slowly. "The spires are made of crystallized starlight, and they reach so high they pierce the cloud layer. Dragons fly between them like living jewels against the sky." "Do they have schools?" Luna asked excitedly. "Schools where dragon children learn things?" The innocent question struck Zephyria like a physical blow. "There are educational institutions," she said carefully. "Young dragons learn military strategy, territorial administration, advanced sciences. What about art? Hope asked. Do they teach dragons to make beautiful things? Zephyria hesitated. Art, like many non-utilitarian pursuits, had been largely relegated to lower castes in the Empire. Some dragons pursue artistic endeavors in their personal time. What about helping others? This from Marcus, the small hatchling who had shown such engineering aptitude. Do they teach dragons how to help creatures who are hurt or scared? Each question revealed another gap in Imperial education, another area where rigid doctrine had replaced compassion and creativity. Zephyria found herself describing an empire that sounded increasingly hollow and cold, compared to the warmth surrounding her in this simple human facility. Sarah, who had been quietly observing the conversation while helping to feed the younger hatchlings, finally spoke up. Your Majesty, may I ask you something? Speak. What was your childhood like? Did you have stories and games and friends to play with? The question hit Zephyria like a photon torpedo. Her childhood had been a carefully orchestrated series of lessons, trials, and competitions designed to mold her into a perfect imperial leader. There had been no games, no simple stories, no friends who cared about her rather than her position. Imperial heirs undergo rigorous preparation for leadership, she said stiffly. But were you happy? Luna asked with the devastating directness of youth. Happy. The word felt foreign in Zephyria's mind. She couldn't remember ever considering happiness as a goal or even a possibility. Duty, strength, conquest, expansion. These were the measures of a successful life in the Empire. Before she could formulate an answer, Hope began to sing. It was a simple melody that Dr. Reeves had taught her, a human lullaby translated into Draconic. Her voice was sweet and clear, and soon the other hatchlings joined in. The harmony was imperfect, some voices high and piping, others deeper and rougher, but it was beautiful in its genuine emotion. Zephyria found herself listening with an intensity that surprised her. When was the last time she had heard music performed for the simple joy of it, rather than as formal court entertainment designed to impress and intimidate? As the song ended, Luna crawled closer to Zephyria's massive head. Big Dragon Mother looked sad. Are you missing your family? The question was innocent, but it opened a wound that Zephyria had thought long healed. Her family, her mate dead in a border war 50 years ago, her own hatchling, abandoned to space when his wing development proved imperfect. Her siblings scattered across the Empire, their relationships formal and distant. I have no family, she said quietly. But you do, Luna protested. You're Dragon Mother to all dragons. That makes us family. The simple logic of a child's mind cut through centuries of imperial conditioning. Luna was right, in a way that formal law and doctrine could never address. These hatchlings were her people, her responsibility, her family, and she had abandoned them. Luna speaks truth, Hope added solemnly. Family isn't just who hatches from the same clutch. Family is who takes care of you when you're sick, who teaches you new things, who sings with you when you're sad. Like Sarah and Dr. Reeves and all the humans here, Arya chimed in. They're our family too, even though they're not dragons. Zephyria looked around the circle of faces, human and dragon alike, and saw something she had never witnessed in her imperial court. Genuine affection that crossed species lines. These humans had taken in creatures that could one day grow large enough to destroy their entire colony, and they loved them simply for who they were. Your Majesty, Dr. Reeves said softly, there's something we haven't told you. In the past month, we've detected signals from at least 12 more Imperial ships passing through this sector. Each time we've monitored brief energy signatures consistent with hatchlings being ejected into space. The words hit Zephyria like ice water. 12 more ships. 12 more hatchlings deemed unworthy and discarded. How many have you been able to save? 3, Dr. Reeves replied sadly. The others were too far away, or we detected them too late. But Your Majesty, if we had better ships, more resources, advance warning of Imperial movements. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Zephyria understood perfectly. With the right support, these humans could save dozens, perhaps hundreds of discarded hatchlings, but that would require resources that only the Empire could provide. You're asking me to betray everything I've built, Zephyria said slowly. No, Sarah replied firmly. We're asking you to build something better. Luna yawned, the excitement of the day finally catching up with her small form. Sarah gently lifted her into the carrier, and the hatchling immediately snuggled down into the soft padding. Will Big Dragon Mother still be here when Luna wakes up? The little dragon asked sleepily. Zephyria found herself making a promise she hadn't planned to make. Yes, little one, I will be here. As the hatchlings were settled for the night, Zephyria remained in the common room with the human staff. The facility quieted around them, but her mind was anything but peaceful. What you're asking, she said finally, would require me to fundamentally change the Empire, to challenge laws that have stood for millennia. Yes, Ambassador Harrison agreed. It would. It would mean civil war. My own people would see me as a traitor to everything they believe. Some would, Dr. Reeves acknowledged, but others might see you as the leader who finally showed them a better way. Zephyria considered this. In her 3 centuries of rule, she had inspired fear, respect, and obedience. But when was the last time she had inspired hope? When was the last time her actions had created something beautiful, rather than simply expanding her domain? She looked through the window at the facility's gardens, where the older hatchlings who could move around would play tomorrow. She thought about Luna's bright curiosity, Hope's generous spirit, Marcus's innovative mind. She thought about all the potential that was being wasted, all the lives that could be saved. If I were to consider such a change, she said slowly, what would you need from me? The question hung in the air like a challenge and a promise. For the first time in her long life, Zephyria was considering a conquest not of territory or resources, but of her own deeply held beliefs. The Dragon Empress was about to embark on the most difficult campaign of her career, the battle to transform an empire. The War Council aboard the Draconius Rex had never been more tense. Admiral Paraxis, Zephyria's most trusted military commander, paced the length of the crystalline conference chamber, his massive bronze form radiating barely controlled fury. The other high-ranking dragons seated around the table wore expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. You cannot be serious, my Empress, Paraxis growled, his voice like grinding stone. An alliance with humans? Protecting genetic defectives? This goes against every principle our civilization was built upon. Zephyria sat at the head of the table, her golden form calm but alert. She had expected this reaction when she called her senior staff together to announce her decision. What she hadn't expected was how little their disapproval affected her. After spending 3 days at the care center, watching the hatchlings grow and learn and love, the concerns of her military commanders seemed petty and short-sighted. Our principles, she replied evenly, have led us to discard hundreds of potentially valuable individuals simply because they don't meet arbitrary physical standards. Arbitrary? General Vorthak, her chief strategist, spread his wings in an aggressive display. Physical perfection is the foundation of dragon superiority. Without it, we become weak, deluded, no better than the lesser species we rule. I have seen a paralyzed hatchling teach newcomers courage, Zephyria countered. I have watched a blind dragon navigate by sound better than most sighted beings. I have observed a small, supposedly weak hatchling demonstrate engineering concepts that could revolutionize our construction techniques. Tell me, General, how is this weakness? Because they require care. Paraxis slammed one massive claw against the table, leaving deep scratches in the crystal surface. Resources, attention, specialized treatment. In the wild, they would die as nature intended. By saving them, we waste effort that could be directed towards strengthening our superior offspring. The humans do not see it as waste, Zephyria said. They see it as investment. Each hatchling they save becomes a unique contributor to their society. Luna, the one I first encountered, is already trilingual and shows remarkable problem-solving abilities. Her supposed defect has led her to develop cognitive skills far beyond her age. One example proves nothing, scoffed Admiral Christos, her naval commander. And even if these creatures possess some useful traits, why should we ally with humans to save them? Why not simply order the humans to turn over their rescued hatchlings and continue with proper imperial policy? Zephyria's eyes flashed dangerously. Because I gave my word, and because these humans have succeeded where we have failed. The room fell silent. Dragons valued their word above nearly everything else, but the idea that humans had succeeded where dragons had failed was almost incomprehensible to the assembled commanders. Explain, Admiral Paraxis demanded. In 3 months, 17 hatchlings that we condemned to death have not only survived but thrived. They are happy, productive, growing stronger each day. They love their caregivers and are loved in return. When did any of you last feel genuine affection from your subordinates rather than calculated obedience? The question struck home. Zephyria could see several of her commanders shift uncomfortably. The Imperial system was built on hierarchy and strength, but it was also cold, emotionally distant, and increasingly hollow. The humans offer us something we have lost, she continued. They offer us the chance to be worthy of the power we possess. To be protectors rather than merely conquerors. Pretty words, General Vortex sneered. But what of practicalities? How do you propose to implement this alliance without triggering a civil war? It was a fair question, and one Zephyria had been wrestling with since making her decision. We will start small. I am declaring this sector a pilot zone for new Imperial policy. We will work with the humans to establish rescue protocols for discarded hatchlings. We will study the results, document the successes, and gradually expand the program. And when the Imperial Senate learns of this, Admiral Christos asked, when the Purity Council demands your removal for violating the ancient laws? Then we will have evidence to present, Zephyria replied. We will have living proof that there is a better way. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's communication system activated. The massive holographic display at the center of the table flickered to life, showing the face of Captain Stellaris, commander of one of the patrol ships in the outer system. My Empress, forgive the interruption, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Speak, Zephyria commanded, grateful for the distraction from her increasingly hostile command staff. We've detected an Imperial transport ship, the Stormclaw, approximately 6 hours out from the edge of the system. According to their transmitted manifest, they are carrying a full clutch of hatchlings for genetic evaluation. The blood in Zephyria's veins seemed to turn to ice. A full clutch meant anywhere from 8 to 12 hatchlings. If any of them were found to have genetic variations, they would be ejected into space before the ship left the system. How many ships in their escort? She asked, her mind already calculating the tactical situation. 3 destroyers, my Empress. Standard protection for valuable cargo. Zephyria stood, her massive form casting shadows across the conference table. This was it. The moment when her new philosophy would be tested against Imperial reality. She could order Captain Stellaris to ignore the Stormclaw and allow Imperial policy to proceed as it always had. Or she could take action to save whatever hatchlings might be deemed unworthy. Admiral Piraxis, she commanded, prepare the fleet for intercept. We will meet the Stormclaw before they complete their evaluation. My Empress. Piraxis looked shocked. You cannot seriously be considering interfering with an official Imperial transport. The political ramifications will be severe, Zephyria finished, but not as severe as abandoning children to die when I have the power to save them. She moved toward the chamber's exit, her decision made. As she reached the door, Admiral Piraxis called after her. And if the transport refuses to surrender the hatchlings, if they demand to know by what authority you interfere with Imperial law? Zephyria paused, her hand on the door controls. When she turned back, her expression was resolute. Then I will tell them the truth, that I act by the authority of someone who has finally learned the difference between strength and cruelty. Within an hour, the Imperial flagship was moving through hyperspace toward the intercept point, accompanied by 2 escort cruisers. In her private chambers, Zephyria sent a coded message to the new Terra colony, informing them that rescued hatchlings would be arriving soon, and requesting that additional medical teams be prepared. She also sent a more formal communication to the Imperial Senate on Dracoheim, officially notifying them of her new policy regarding genetic diversity in dragon populations. The response would likely be swift and furious, but by the time it arrived, she would have either succeeded in her mission or failed so completely that political consequences would be irrelevant. As her ship flew toward its destination, Zephyria found herself thinking about Luna's small voice asking if she would still be there when the hatchling woke up. She had made a promise to that little dragon, and to all the others like her who were scattered across the galaxy, unwanted and alone. For 3 centuries she had been the Dragon Empress, ruler of a vast empire built on conquest and genetic supremacy. But today, for the first time in her long life, she was going to be something more important. She was going to be a dragon who kept her word to the children who needed her most. The Stormclaw was about to encounter a very different kind of Imperial authority than they were expecting. The Imperial transport Stormclaw dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the new Terra system, its massive hull gleaming silver against the starfield. Captain Thalax, a veteran dragon warrior with scales the color of burnished steel, reviewed the genetic evaluation reports with growing disgust. Of the 11 hatchlings in this clutch, 4 had been marked for disposal. The first had a slight irregularity in wing membrane thickness. The second showed early signs of scale pattern variation. The third was smaller than average, and the fourth had been born with heterochromatic eyes, 1 gold, 1 silver. By imperial law, all 4 would be ejected into the vacuum within the hour. "Captain," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving a priority signal from an unidentified fleet approaching our position." Thalax looked up from his reports, immediately alert. "Unidentified? In imperial space?" "Sir, I'm reading the energy signatures now. It's the Draconius Rex. The Empress herself is approaching our position." The bridge fell silent. Every dragon aboard knew that the Empress rarely left her flagship, except for the most critical military operations or formal state visits. Her presence here, in what should have been a routine cargo run, was unprecedented. "Open a channel," Thalax commanded, though his mind was racing with possibilities. Had there been some security breach? Was there an external threat to the hatchlings they were carrying? The main viewer activated, revealing the imposing figure of Empress Zephyria herself. Behind her, Thalax could see the bridge of the most powerful ship in the Imperial fleet, with her senior staff standing at attention. "Captain Thalax," the Empress said, her voice carrying the authority of 3 centuries of absolute rule, "you will prepare to transfer your cargo to my vessel immediately." Thalax felt his world tilt. "Transfer the hatchlings to the Empress's personal ship?" "My lady, the cargo manifest indicates that 4 of the specimens require disposal according to Imperial genetic standards. Are you ordering that they be transferred for personal disposal?" "I am ordering that all hatchlings be transferred to my care," Zephyria replied, her tone brooking no argument. "Alive and unharmed." The words hit Thalax like a physical blow. "All hatchlings? Including the genetically imperfect ones?" This went against every Imperial protocol he knew. "My Empress," he said carefully, "I must respectfully request clarification. Imperial law requires that genetically inferior specimens be eliminated to maintain the purity of our species. Are you suggesting we violate that law?" "I am not suggesting, Captain. I am ordering. You will transfer all hatchlings to my vessel within the next standard hour, or I will be forced to take them by other means." Behind her, Thalax could see Admiral Pyraxis and the other fleet commanders. Their expressions were grim, but none showed surprise at the Empress's orders. This had clearly been planned, not a spontaneous decision. "My lady," Thalax tried again, "perhaps if you could explain the reasoning behind this unprecedented order. My crew needs to understand." "The reasoning is simple, Captain. I have learned that our definition of genetic inferiority may be flawed. These hatchlings deserve the chance to prove their worth rather than being condemned before they can even speak." Thalax felt the ground shifting beneath everything he thought he knew about the Empire. The Empress, the living embodiment of draconic supremacy, was questioning the fundamental principles of their civilization. "Captain," his tactical officer whispered urgently, "the Empress's escort ships are moving into combat positions around us." Thalax looked at his tactical display and felt his blood run cold. 3 Imperial cruisers had formed a perfect intercept pattern around the Stormclaw. They weren't threatening yet, but the message was clear. Compliance was not optional. "Captain Thalax," the Empress continued, "I understand this is difficult to accept, but I have seen evidence that these supposedly inferior hatchlings can become extraordinary individuals, given proper care and opportunity. I will not allow potential to be wasted for the sake of outdated doctrine." "But, my lady," Thalax protested, "what will happen to these flawed specimens? Who will care for creatures that cannot survive in proper Imperial society?" "They will be cared for by beings who understand that strength comes in many forms," Zephyria replied. "And they will be given the chance to contribute to something greater than conquest." The connection terminated, leaving Thalax staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew waited for orders, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright fear. They had just witnessed their absolute ruler contradicting the most basic laws of their civilization. "Sir," his executive officer said quietly, "what are your orders?" Thalax considered his options. He could refuse the Empress's command and demand formal written authorization. He could try to complete the disposal quickly before the transfer could be arranged. He could even attempt to flee the system, though against the Imperial flagship and her escorts, such an action would be suicide. But as he weighed his choices, something the Empress had said echoed in his mind. Strength comes in many forms. He thought about his own nephew, born with a slightly malformed tail, who had been saved from disposal only because Thalax's sister had hidden the defect until after the formal evaluation. That nephew had grown up to become one of the Empire's finest engineers, designing the very ships that now surrounded the Stormclaw. "Prepare the hatchlings for transfer," he ordered finally. "All of them alive." "Sir?" His executive officer looked confused. "Even the ones marked for disposal?" "Especially those ones," Thalax said firmly. "If the Empress has found a better way, then perhaps it's time we stopped pretending that genetic perfection is the only form of value." The transfer took place in the cargo bay of the Draconius Rex, the largest space available for such an operation. Zephyria watched personally as each small frightened hatchling was brought aboard, their tiny forms dwarfed by the massive chamber around them. The 7 acceptable hatchlings were alert and curious, chirping softly as they were placed in protective carriers. But it was the 4 condemned ones that broke Zephyria's heart. They seemed to sense their fate, huddling together in terrified silence, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. The smallest one, a little male whose size would have marked him for death, looked up at Zephyria with huge golden eyes. "Are you here to hurt us?" he whispered in barely audible Draconic. Zephyria knelt down until she was at the hatchling's level. "No, little one. I'm here to take you somewhere safe. Somewhere you'll be loved and cared for regardless of how you were born." "But we're broken," said the hatchling with heterochromatic eyes, her different-colored gaze bright with unshed tears. "The evaluator said we were mistakes." "You are not mistakes," Zephyria said firmly. "You are unique, and that makes you precious, not worthless." As the hatchlings were settled into their new carriers, Sarah Chen arrived with several other human caregivers from the New Terra colony. Zephyria had arranged for them to be transported to the flagship to help with the transition, knowing that the frightened babies would respond better to the gentle humans than to imposing adult dragons. "Hello there," Sarah said softly, approaching the group of condemned hatchlings. "I'm Sarah, and these are my friends. We're here to take care of you." The change was almost immediate. The hatchlings, who had been cowering in fear moments before, began to relax as Sarah and the other humans knelt down to their level, offering gentle touches and soothing words. "Are you angels?" the smallest hatchling asked in wonder. "The stories say that when dragons die, angels come to take them to the peaceful place." "We're not angels, sweetie," Sarah laughed gently. "We're just people who think you're wonderful exactly as you are." Luna, who had insisted on coming along for this rescue mission, crawled over to the group of new hatchlings. "Don't be scared," she told them proudly. "Sarah and her friends saved me too. They're really good at taking care of dragons." Watching this scene unfold, Zephyria felt something shift permanently in her chest. These humans, these supposedly inferior beings, were showing more courage, compassion, and wisdom than her own empire had demonstrated in centuries. They were saving lives her people would have destroyed, nurturing potential her civilization would have wasted. Captain Thalax approached her as the last of the hatchlings was secured for transport. "My Empress," he said quietly, "may I speak freely?" "You may. I have served the Empire for 80 years. I have enforced the genetic purity laws without question, believing them necessary for our strength. But watching this today, seeing how these humans care for our cast-offs, I think perhaps we have been strong in all the wrong ways." Zephyria nodded slowly. "Change is never easy, Captain, but sometimes it's necessary for survival. What will happen now? When word of this reaches Dracoheim, then we will face whatever consequences come," Zephyria replied. "But we will face them knowing that we chose compassion over cruelty, growth over stagnation." As the rescued hatchlings were transported to the surface of New Terra, Zephyria realized that she had passed a point of no return. She was no longer just the Dragon Empress ruling through fear and tradition. She had become something new, a leader willing to challenge her own people's deepest beliefs for the sake of innocent lives. The war for the soul of the Draconic Empire was about to begin, and it would be fought not with weapons and fleets but with the Essi,